Hello, hello. All right, we are live. Hey, everyone. I'm testing a few more things, so please let me know if you can hear me and you can see me all right in the chat. Hey, Tengis, good to see you again. You can hear me all right? All right, hang on. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. All right, sweet. Hey, Miroslav. Awesome. So it looks like everything is working. Like I said, I'm testing a few things. Just I installed a few acoustic panels, some things around the whole setup. So I'm using just a microphone that is outside of the frame, that one over there. So yeah, I just want to test like how it sounds, the quality, and if it is clear. Because honestly, I could use the other one, which it sounds a bit better, but this one allows me to be more me, like more animated. I would say. Sweet. All right, so let's go ahead and jump straight into it. I'm gonna share my screen. Alrighty. Oops, this is not the one. There we go. All right. Um, Let me also just want to tweak a few things just so that I know some of you guys told me about the UI. Sometimes it gets just lost, so I'm just going to fix that really quickly. All right, so it's just I'll just stick the camera in there. That's probably a little bit better. And if anything, I'll just get rid of it. Cool. So let me know if I can see the chat from YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If there's anyone in Twitch as well, feel free to let me know. And let's just jump straight into it. I'm gonna cover a few things that I promised I wanted to get into, and apologize for yesterday's yeah. I missed the live stream. To be honest, I have a little clock just in front of me. You won't be able to see it, but it's just a cheap little clock that shows the time for me, and it doesn't automatically update when the time saving, the daylight saving changes. So for me, it was like just fine, and I haven't updated it. So that was the reason. But today we are going to be talking a little bit about rendering, and I'll be able to show you some cool stuff that I've prepared. Um, these type of things, I'll just show you like kind of like an old school way of approaching the maps in a way. I can show you some stuff painter as well if you're interested in Marmoset as well. Let me just show you some of the final renders so you know what we're talking about. Here we go. So this is pretty much what I'm trying to get or to show you how I build this render. And to be honest, this is pretty easy because all we've done is or what I've done is I took what we had from ZBrush, I exported all the bits and pieces that I needed, put it into Marmoset, and just render this. And the quality that you get from Marmoset is absolutely fantastic. The subsurface scattering, the reflection in the eyes, all of those things are from Marmoset, and there's very little things that you need to do to get this quality. Obviously, there's a bunch of things that I would like to do to improve it, but look at the this type of close-ups and this sort of like nice softness that you get around the eyes, maybe around here. All of these is because of the ray tracing in Marmoset or the subsurface scattering. And we're going to be using some volumetrics to achieve that, so it's all good. And I'm also going to give you some tips because you might notice that, by the way, this is the highest subdivision level of this character, which is currently at 6 subdivision levels, and we have 4 million polygons. You could see a little bit of this. Yeah, you could see a little bit of the faceted polygons, really, but that's all good. Um, you could again subdivide this and even go into HD geometry if you wanted to. But to be honest, because I'm gonna render it from you know, maybe from this distance, we don't really need to get into any of that. And I'm gonna give you a technique that is pretty cool so that we can achieve this type of stuff. Let me just show you. So all of this additional detail that you might not see, all the sharpness on those details, maybe here at the top you kind of see it. Um, those are achieved through a detailed normal map that I'm going to show you how to do as well. So anyway, a bunch of things that I think is going to be fun. So if you have questions about anything or any part of the process, feel free to ask. This is what these sessions are for, really. So let me just check and see if there's anything that we missed from last time. Any questions that you might have about how we got to this point, and then we'll just crack on with it. Hey Leonardo, hey Tony, John, hey Kurt, good to have you here. Evening, Dominic. Would it be possible to place the camera right above the bottom UI? Yeah, for the stream, I will just rather get rid of it really, to be honest, because there's only options to put it in the corners. So I cannot like drag it and put it specifically in one place. It has to be either in the corners or not. But what I can do is, let's see, we could switch to a different mode. I don't know if this is going to do anything, to be honest. All right. I think this is another way of going about it. It's just that if I hide the camera, I also need to make sure that the audio is still on. All right, so this is full screen. This is probably better. You don't really need to see me unless I need to explain something with my hands. I'll just come back to it. So let's just work with this for now. So the thing is, we'd love to see more of Marmoset. Yep, we'll do that. And I mean, he looks intergalactic. So yeah, can you show a micro detail map? Is it rendered in Maya? No, the render is completely in Marmoset. I will definitely show you the micro detail. I'll show you how to build it, a bunch of stuff. So let me do a quick recap of what we have. So I have a bunch of faces really, but that is just purely. Also, let me go into skin shade. This is just kind of like what we did last stream, so you can catch up with this last time. Sorry, from last week, you can catch up with that on the YouTube channel. And it is basically the process or the progression of how we got to this point, starting from something that is very, very bright colors, very saturated and generic. But this is something we did kind of like to be able to create a much more realistic effect, I would say. Even though it just, from the distance, you look at it and you go like, yep, this is just a red skin creature. The idea is that, if you zoom in closely and go to flat shader, you see all the intricacies and all the variation in the skin color, which gives it that additional level of control, I would say, or realism, but through the control of changing the hues and the values. So and also this helps us to create things that are a bit more um, I would say it accurate when we repurpose this channel or when we repurpose the albedo. This is gonna make more sense in just a second. All right, so let's go back to preview. This is the skin shade 4 that we've been using to polypaint. I have an additional material that's a little bit overexposed. This one is kind of like something that I like to do when I already have polypaint, especially for this, but I also want to be able to visualize some of the details. And the reason I have this one, which is just a blend material, is because if I go to something like the basic material, this is good, and you can see some of the details, but it's kind of like overriding a little bit of the polypaint. And if I do the other way, so if I just use this to visualize the polypaint or like a truest color of this character, then I lose the bumpiness or the details. So I have this one as an in between. That's all. There's no need to use it. In fact, let's just go with basic, and that'll be it. Okay, so the first thing we also did the eyes. So we painted the eyes with polypaint. So I have 4 subdivision levels. So you see you can still see a bit of the faceted polygons, but that's all right. This is a pretty easy thing to do. So if you were not here last time, and well, even if you were here, I just want to show you something additional. So let's click on polysphere. So this is just a sphere 3D with 4 subdivision levels. The reason I can select this is because I previously created a 3D sphere and I subdivided it. That's all. That's why I have it in here. You won't be able to see. I mean, you will be able to see the sphere, but you won't be able to see the sphere 3D with the subdivision. So you just need to click on 3D sphere and then subdivide it. So imagine if this was just the eye. By the way, another little trick here is that if you're gonna do an eye, I would recommend just to paint or to deform it from here, because if you do it from, hang on, let me just go back. If you do it from here, from the top, because this is going to ultimately converge into a single vertex, is going to create some triangulation. So the smoothing, hopefully you can see it, is going to create some weird artifacts. So you can just use this section right here, or you can convert this sphere into a quad sphere. In fact, let's just do that because I think that'll be good. And that's another trick for you. So if you press the the W, E, or R to go to move, scale, or rotate and bring in the gizmo, you can click on the gear icon and then you can choose the polysphere. So the polysphere, the difference between polysphere and the sphere 3D, sorry, it's exactly that. Like one, just all the polar coordinates will just convert into a single point, which is at the top and the bottom, whereas the polysphere is basically a cube that has been turned into a sphere. So there you go. You have these cones here that allows you to change the resolution, but this is pretty much it. Let's click on, oops, Gizmo and click on Gizmo 3D. So now you have this polysphere. This should be a perfect sphere, but if you have doubts, you can also go to the deformation palette, and then you can go to the spherize. Is that how you say this word? Spherize, sphere, yeah, spherize, and then you just push that all the way to 1. So if it's not a sphere, it should basically turn that into sphere. But this is pretty much what you need. Let's go ahead and subdivide this a few times. So now we have maybe 6 subdivision levels, 300, almost 400,000. Cool. So the trick, or the other thing that I wanted to show you is that if you want to paint an eye, a very simple thing you can do is select the skin shade 4 and fill it with a base material, or base color, sorry. I usually go for like a pale yellow, and that will be my sclera, the color of the sclera. And then I'm going to use radial symmetry. So I have it here in my UI, but you can just go to the transform palette, click on activate symmetry, and by default, it's going to be obviously in the x-axis, so you can paint on both sides or sculpt in both sides. But what you want to do is turn that off and turn the Y channel on. Actually, let me just double check. I get confused between. No, it's the Z channel. All right, and then turn on radial symmetry. So you see now I have 8 points that follow my cursor in a radial fashion. So that's pretty much it. Let me go back in here. So yeah, Z just means that it's going to show you the symmetry, or the radial symmetry on the Z axis, which is the depth in this case. And the radial count is how many points. So I would say start with something pretty high, like 32. It's up to you, but like 32 give you more points, and that allows you to paint a little bit faster. So what I'll do is I'm going to select something like the soft paint brush. This is a custom brush. I'll show you how to build those in previous streams. If you don't have that, or you can't be bothered, going to other streams to catch up, you could definitely use something that comes with paint, that comes with ZBrush, which is this paint right here. So you could do that, and then just change the focal shift so that it's softer. That's it. So I'm going to use that because that's why I built that brush. And then I'm going to use a reddish tone, something pretty saturated and dark. And I'm going to go towards the back. And I'm just going to paint this. I'm going to reduce the RGB intensity so that I can have more control with the pressure. And this is going to be basically that sort of blood vessels and redness of the eye. So you could apply the same technique for anything like humanoid or creature. Doesn't really matter. I think this works quite well as a technique. Then, if you want to add a few more, let's say, veins so that it creates something a bit more realistic, what you can do is also very, very simple. Let's go to the transform palette. Let's reduce the radial count to something like an odd number would be good. So maybe like 5 or 3, something low and odd, so that it doesn't have that symmetrical and it's not easy to see it. So let's go ahead and change this brush. I want to use this Sharpie one. Or let's just use the one that comes with zero, so that it's the same thing really. And then I'm going to change the stroke for the spray and also the alpha. I'm going to go for the alpha 22 probably. Yeah, I think this is going to be good. And then let's go ahead and do something like that. Now, this is obviously a bit too much, so I want to change a few things. You'll notice that there is variation in color as well as size. So I want to maintain the color. I don't want to variate that. So the first thing I need to do is go to the stroke palette, open the modifiers, and I'm going to go to color and reduce that. So this basically tells ZBrush I don't want to have any variation in the color intensity. So when I do this, now it's going to be the same color. The next thing I want to do is, again, in the stroke palette, the scale variation is fine. I think I want to have like different vessels, let's say, different veins, but I want to reduce the flow so there is less of that, and I want to increase the placement. So if I reduce I'm going to do it one at a time so you can see. If I reduce the flow to 0.05 and then go like this, you see there is less of those. And then the next thing is if I go to the placement, I can push that to maybe 1, and that basically spreads things quite a bit. So I think maybe that was a little bit too much. Let's go back to point 6, and that'll be good. I'm also going to turn off lazy mouse. There we go. And then I'm just going to, with pressure, just you know touch softly on the canvas here, and that essentially creates that effect. You can spend a bit more time, but this is kind of like the starting point, and then we can reset this brush that goes back to what comes with ZBrush. I'm gonna reduce that quite a bit, and I'm gonna do some like kind of like custom veins, again with a bit of radial symmetry. But you see, the more points that you have and in the radial symmetry, the more evident that the symmetry or the radial symmetry would be. So at this point, I will just switch from the 5 to 3, and then I'll just start pointing, you know, connecting things a little bit, and that helps to create the symmetry. And then you can obviously turn off the symmetry and maybe do like a couple of very unique lines or something a bit thicker, like so. So again, there's a bunch of ways of achieving this result in a more realistic way. But I think I'm going to leave it as it is. So this is the first part, right? Now, these veins, obviously, if you want to go for something more realistic, they will also have a bit of a bump, let's say, or a bit of depth. So you can, as you draw this, you can also enable the Z add, so that it will also create that sort of bumpiness in the veins. So up to you. I think this is more than enough. And then the next thing is, let's do the same radial symmetry. I'm going to set the count. By the way, I have all the controllers here, but it's exactly the same thing that I just showed you. So I'm going to set the radial count back to 32. And this time I'm going to select something for the iris. So I'll go for a desaturated sort of gray tone. And this is another really cool thing just to keep in mind. So it's a little bit too much. So I'll do something like this. And you see, because I have that radial symmetry of 32, it's pretty easy. But this is another cool thing that I was going to say. So the older the creature, or the older the person, or the older the character that you're making, the more diffuse and more, let's say, soft and desaturated the outer edge of the iris that would be. So if you compare like the eyes of an old person with the eyes of a baby, right? The sharpness of that iris is going to change quite a bit. So depending on, those are like subtle things that you can do to create a bit of that, reference of the age. So I'll start with that. Let's go with maybe like a really dark brownish tone, and then just paint around it. And then it's gonna move that towards the center, like so. And then we can go for more like a saturated color, maybe like a lighter one, and we can pay like so. And again, if you want to make something a bit more realistic or something that has, I don't know, that makes a bit more interesting to look at, you can start varying the radial count to odd numbers. I usually do something like 7 and start adding some color. You can also switch to a different alpha, like alpha 60, just so you can create some like veins of the eye. I'm gonna push this even further, and I'm gonna switch to another radial count of 5. And the game just becomes more of like this sort of thing, like changing the radial count from 3 to 5 to 7 again, you know, and varying obviously the saturation of the colors, that sort of thing. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think you get the idea. So let's go ahead and select just the black color and paint the pupil. I'm going to do 32. Again, the higher the number, the faster and the more accurate this effect is going to be. That's it. You don't really need more than this. You can export that at the highest resolution, and you can apply a different material later on in the rendering software, and that also gives you that that really nice effect for the eye. So that's pretty much what I've done for the eyes here, and I'll show you. They're nothing more than just polypaint. Obviously, the difference here is that the sphere is kind of like an oblong here. That has a little bit of a bump to account for the cornea. So in a more realistic scenario, you should have two different meshes, one that has that bump. Let me just show you. I do actually have them. It's just, we don't really need to get into that. So maybe from the top. So you see, hopefully you can see that bump in there, and then there's the actual eyes don't have it. So this is where you could actually paint the iris and everything else, and then you use this other object that has the little bump to create a clear material, and that will also produce that sort of lensing effect of the eye. But yeah, just want to keep things simple. It's the same process. It's just that you have two different meshes. One is clear. Alrighty, so we basically did a quick recap of what we have, the painting of the actual skin that's done in the previous stream, and we have all the details. So now it's how, like the process is, how do we put this into a render engine? In this case, Marmoset. And these are some of the questions that I usually get, like how do you move from ZBrush into Marmoset or into Blender, into different rendering software? The process is super simple. So there's a couple of things that we need to do or to think about, right? So the first one is how are we gonna take, 16, well, not 16 million polygons. Let's actually keep it a bit more realistic. So I'm gonna take this because I have a lot of hidden meshes. So I'm gonna take this one and I'm gonna clone it. And then I'm also gonna take the eyes and I'm gonna copy that, go here and paste it. And then the tears, like these tear ducts, I'm gonna copy those, go back in here and paste it. So that's probably more realistic. All right, so now we have 4.2 million polygons in this character. We can just go higher. And to be honest, renders like Marmoset and something with like Blender nowadays with Vulkan, you can actually export this and it will be fine. 4 million polygons. In fact, I have a video in YouTube where I was testing the Vulkan, and I don't know. For me, it just works amazing. So I was playing with, I think, over 4 million polygons or 48 million polygons and 40, yeah, something like that. I can't remember. So it was fine. So the point is that if you like what you see here, you can just go ahead and export it straight away. However, we're gonna try to optimize things a tiny bit, and you'll see that the difference is, well, I mean, you won't see any difference really. So let's do that. I'm gonna go to the head first, and I'm gonna find a nice middle ground. So let's say maybe subdivision level 3. So that gives me 65,000 polygons. And it's not too bad. We can achieve all the details later on with the normal map, so we don't need to export more than this. As in, the resolution. You'll see, there we go. So you can see this. That's what I'm gonna be exporting. The same thing with the eyes. I think the eyes are going to be maybe 2, a level 2. And the tier is going to be level 2 as well. Yeah, that should be okay. maybe level 3. All right. So this part or like this step is just to decide how much definition you want to have in the rendering tool. You can subdivide it later. So if I export this at this subdivision level, you can export that. And in fact, if you're trying to showcase a low poly mesh or like something that goes into our game engine, you probably need something like this. But in our case, we're just gonna do like a nice concept. So something like this will be fine. But yeah, on a side note, you can export it as full res. The other thing that we need to consider is that if we export this character, if we export this mesh, we definitely need to have UVs if we want to do if we want to bring in some additional textures. You don't have to. That's another misconception. Yet you don't have to have UVs. In this case, I do have, and I'll show you. So if I click on, let's click on this morph UV, which for you guys that would be under the tool palette all the way to the bottom, UV map, this morph UV, right? And this value of 50 is just so that you can see a little bit of the bump, but you can, morph it, set this to 0, and then you'll see just the UV map with no, like basically flat with no bumpiness. So yeah, we do have UVs for this, or I already had UVs, especially because this is a mesh that, if you remember, or if you were here for the first stream for this character, we started with a base mesh that has, polygroups and it has the UVs and everything, so it's pretty cool. So you don't need to have UVs in order to achieve this at all. But the only thing to keep in mind is that if you were to export this at this resolution, because if you don't have UVs, the only color that you're gonna get is whatever you see at this point. So if you wanna have the true color, as in all these details and all the color that you put in the crevices and all of that, you would have to export it at this resolution. So let's do a quick test just to show you that this can be done, and then we'll go into the texture because it's a bit more of a, I wouldn't say advanced, but more controlled way of doing it. So if you just did a Dynamesh object, right, and you have your color, but you can't be bothered doing the UVs, you can totally get something really, really nice and a really nice render from Marmoset without the need of creating a maps or UV maps. So let's do one more clone. So this one right now, I'm gonna go to the UV maps or the UV map section here, and I'm gonna delete UV. All right, so now we don't have any UV. You'll see that the morph UV is, grayed out. Um, and we're gonna go ahead and export this at subdivision level 6. Okay, so this workflow, I'm gonna show you both, don't worry. But this workflow is essentially if you wanna render your Dynamesh object with polypaint and you don't wanna have UVs, you can totally do it in Marmoset and Blender, in most software that accepts the Vertex color, Vertex color, which is the same thing as polypaint. So Vertex data. So I'm gonna go to the C plugin palette, and I'm gonna go to the FBX exporter. You can also export it as an OBJ, actually, same thing. In fact, I'm gonna show you both. So we'll export FBX later with more pieces, but with this one, we can just go to export here, and that will export as an OBJ. And let me go. Oh man, I have so many things in my desktop. I'm gonna just create a folder temporarily, and I'm gonna make it live stream. All right. Cool. So that's going to export 4 million polygons, so subdivision level 6. And that also is going to hopefully prove my point that you can also do it with 4 million. All right, let's load up Marmoset so that we can do the first test. And I'll have a look at the chat and see if you guys have any. Oh, look at that, free update. Nice. I'll do that after. Alrighty. Hey, Sunny. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Hola desde Seattle. Hello. Do you have UVs to texture? Do you have to have UVs to texture? So that's kind of like the misconception, I think, Tengiz. So if you want to have a texture map, you definitely need to have UVs because you need to tell the software where you're mapping those colors in your 3D space. That's what the texture maps are, and that's what they call maps, really, because you I was kind of like talking here to myself. Sorry about that. So yeah, you have textures maps, or it's called texture maps because ultimately you are mapping a 3D object into a 2D space. So that is going to tell whatever render software you're using where the coordinates are and where, if you paint like an X in the forehead, where that X is going to be in the 3D space. But the misconception is that this character, I would say is textured, as in it has texture. It could be more realistic. It could be just a projection of texture. So if you refer to this character, oh yeah, this is a textured character, but it doesn't mean that the information that you see here is in a texture map or is in a 2D um, image, right? The information is just baked into those vertex. And I don't know if you guys remember, for those who not here, last stream I did at the very end of the stream, I show you kind of like that idea of the vertex color. So yeah, just go back and check that out. But yeah, so there's no need to have UVs if you just want to render something nice with this as polypaint. But if you want to have a bit more control and be able to play with the roughness and metalness, all of those things, it is much better. Again, it gives you more control if you have UVs, and it doesn't have to be great. Like, you know, let me just show you something else very quickly, and we'll stop the branching out. But um, actually, I'll go back so that I don't lose track of what I'm doing. But I'll show you another very simple thing. Hey, Donam, what brushes did you use to create the skin? That was done in the previous stream, or a couple of streams ago, actually, the second one. And we built our own custom brush, and some of them I just use the skin brushes pack. So if you go to the Pablander Academy and go to the resources, you'll find these pack. I mean, all of these packs are in there, but we use this one, the skin brushes pack. Is the one that has the image or the render of Uncle Festa from the Adams family as a kind of like the portrait in there, which I used to as a demo to create this. Okay, so let's see. She said having UVs properly set in Blender to import into Unreal. Yep. So in most cases, the having UVs is going to really help, because the thing is, if you want to have the quality of this skin texture without UVs, you have to have the mesh at this resolution or close by. But I'm gonna give you another, you know, um, another couple of like tricks that we can do. All right. So here we are in Marmoset just to test out this idea, and I'm gonna drag and drop the OBJ. And I'm not gonna spend too much time covering Marmoset, as in like how to use it, because I think it's pretty easy. We're just gonna concentrate on how to get a nice render out of it. So, oops. All right, I don't know what happened there. Let's try it again. Okay, cool. So the first thing I want to do is go to render, and this is a personal thing, and most of the things that I'm going to show you are quite personal, as in what I prefer to do. I don't really like to look at my meshes in this sort of like low quality raster version of the render. And if you have a good graphics card, then you could just do the same thing and it's going to be the same. So I'm going to go to the render tab here and click on raster and click on the ray tracing. So now you get the nice render, and right click and shift, you change the environment. The second thing I like to do straight away is go to sky here in the outliner, and I'm going to change this. I'm going to go to library, and I think the library, I have it here. Yeah. So library, I'm going to go to skies, and I'm going to choose something that's a bit more flattering for this guy. So double click to load. I think this one could be a good one just to set up the textures, and then we can play around with the lighting a bit more. But something flat, simple, that almost gives me this sort of clay look. That's nice. And that's it. Let's collapse this. And I also, just because I don't like to be distracted by the background, especially when I'm working on a presentation of a character, I'm gonna change the ambient sky to color, and I'm gonna change the color to a dark gray. Again, very personal stuff. You can set this in the way that you want to. The other thing I want to do is create a camera straight away so that I can see a more like a true representation of this render, or like what I'm going to render actually. So I want to click on this icon to create a camera. So now we have main camera and we have the camera 0 or camera 1. So this one I'm going to double click and call it render. And the main camera is fine there. So that's it. We now can switch between render and the main camera. So for the render itself, I'm going to play with some settings. So I'm going to click on the camera, and I'm going to go to the field of view, which is allowing you to change that depth of field or like the lens really, so that you can get a flatter perspective or a more distorted one. So I think I'm gonna go for a 55 mil. So that's kind of like a nice portrait lens. And the next thing, which is absolutely crucial, is the scale. Because things like the subsurface scattering, if you were to use displacement, all of those things, they rely on having a good scale. Because, and this is a very simple concept, but sometimes it gets, overlooked. Um, Basically, I just put the camera here so you can see. So let's say that if you're gonna set up the subsurface scattering for the ear. So you're gonna have like that nice sort of translucency and red color around the ear with a backlighting. If you don't set the scale correctly, the software is going to use whatever units you have or you have given to the software to determine how much depth or how much scattering there is through, let's say, a thin surface. So if you tell the software, I want my scattering to be, I don't know, 1 centimeter, or like, doesn't matter the range, let's say 1 centimeter, then the scale needs to match. Because if this character, this head is maybe 5 centimeters, then it's gonna go through the cranium. It's gonna go like quite the depth is gonna be quite a bit. So you need to determine the scale so that whatever you do with the subsurface scattering or displacement or anything that relies heavily on the scale of the objects in the scene works properly. So I'll show you how. I mean, this is a bit abstract, but I'll show you what it means. If I go ahead and we'll come back to this, but if I go to the material of this character, this default one, and I change the transmission to volumetric scattering, see how it's almost like a soap material? That is because the subsurface scattering here is set to millimeters right now, but it is a lot because this character is actually really, really, really tiny compared to the set scene of Marmoset. So even if it is 1 millimeter, the whole light is just going through it, and it's just kind of like a milk material, which is kind of cool. But that is the problem. So if you start, you can tweak it. By the way, you can just go, all right, let's just move it a little bit, and okay, this is better. But it's not solving the underlying issue, which is the scale. So there are two things you can do. You can go to ZBrush and you can export this at a different scale that matches whatever you want to do. So very quickly, just another tip here for you. You could just bring in the gizmo and switch to the transpose line, this one right here. This is the way that ZBrush used to work before. I quite like this one, but if you click and drag, this is the transpose line. So clicking and dragging, I want to go from the bottom of the neck and all the way to the top of the head. And you'll see that in the units section here at the top left, it just tells you there is 0.3 units. ZBrush works with units that are generic. So you can turn these units into anything. You can say to ZBrush, this is actually, I want these 0.3 units to be meters, right? So it will be about 35 centimeters. Or you can say, I want these 0.35 units to be kilometers, right? You can choose whatever you want. And that is done through the Scale Master. I mean, you can do it manually, but the Scale Master is probably the easiest way. So you go to the C plugin palette, and you find the scale master here, and then you can determine that. So you can set the scale, and then you can just choose, I want this to be centimeters or whatever, right? So I'm not gonna do that because I don't wanna mess with the other stuff that I've done, but you just click on set the scene scale. Is gonna ask you, so as soon as, I'm gonna do it actually. Set scene scale is gonna ask you what you want those units to be, right? So you wanna be 0.03 centimeters, you want it to be meters, you want it to be feet, inches. I want to press scale, but you just choose this one and it automatically adjusts the scene for you. So that's one way to do it. Probably if you wanna play with different software, want to send this character to Unreal or to different multiple software within the pipeline, it's actually a good idea if you set the scale. But in my case, I don't care because I can do it in the render. So this is the other method. So you can just go to the Marmoset here and click on the scene settings. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to click on the gear icon and show you the show scale reference. So from the gear icon here, if I click on this, you'll see this thing. I'm going to show you. See how tiny that head is compared to this reference scale. So this is the scene reference that Marmoset likes to use, right? I know just because I've done this multiple times that anything that I export from ZBrush, it actually comes as, let's say, 0.1 of 100% scale. So all I need to do is from the scene into the scale units, I'm going to take this one, I want to set it to 100 and hit enter. So now if I get closer, hang on, I just need to select it. Let's go here. Ah, this is always really annoying. You know what? Let me do, I just want to get closer. Hang on. All right. Okay, now that I've shown you what it does, I'm just going to hit 100 again. There we go. All right. So it's a little bit better. So you see my head roughly fits the head of a human in this case. So that's what I wanted to do. I'm going to turn off scale. And now you see also the subsurface scattering is working a lot nicer. And I didn't have to change the scale or anything. So that's kind of like the setup. That's what I would like to do to get started. Now I'm going to, yeah, so, oh, the other thing is we were talking about the texture, right? So let me just show you that and then we'll come back to the proper thing. So if I select this and double click on it, right now I don't have any texture, but remember we exported the high resolution, the 4 million polygons, meaning that each one of these vertex or vertices or points, each one of those it's loaded with information in color. So every single dot here will have a information in color. So we can retrieve that from Marmoset quite easily. And all we have to do is go to the albedo and switch from albedo, which is expecting a map, a texture map, and switch that to vertex color. If we click on that one, we have our color. That's it. And you still have the nice subsurface scattering. Again, we're gonna come back to this in just a bit, but you now have something that looks really, really nice with the color from ZBrush. So this is literally what we painted in ZBrush. If you want to change the color, right? If you want to, let's say, do some kind of mask or something in around the eyes, you'll have to do it in ZBrush, and then you'll have to re-export the mesh. So that is something to keep in mind. In fact, let me just show you another cool thing. So I'm gonna let's choose this one. So if I do something like this, right? If I want to do some kind of tribal thing, and if I export this again, let's do with the OBJ as well. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna replace the same OBJ. So let's export that. So it's going to replace the OBJ that I exported previously. So meaning it's going to override these points here in the vertex color. But Marmoset, if I switch back, should already, or it should be updating. I think it's still saving. There we go. So you could just play around with this. So all you need to do in terms of the workflow is update your mesh in ZBrush or your polypaint, send it to or save it or export it as an OBJ. If you replace the previous one, then Marmoset, because what Marmoset is doing is referencing the OBJ wherever you saved it, then it's going to update automatically. And it's the same thing with maps. So we'll do that in a bit. So yeah, that's pretty much how you move from ZBrush into Marmoset without any UVs. You can just export your polypaint and all of that good stuff. And of course, you can play around with more things like roughness and even you can make it metallic, all of that good stuff. But I'm going to show you that with maps, because the maps is what, or like when you have UVs, that's what really matters when you have, or you want to have more control over the the placement of the roughness or the variation in the metal. So for instance, if you want to have this blue line as metallic for whatever reason, there is no real like easy way to tell the software, oh, I want to make metallic this part but not the rest, because you just have like this 0 to 1 relationship. You don't have the way to map out where you want to have the metalness. So this is where having UVs and having maps work really well, because you can tell the software, look at this UV map, and then whatever this you have this blue paint, make it metallic. So I'll show you that. Let's go ahead and get rid of this already, because we're not going to use that one. That was just an example to show you that you don't need to have UVs. You can just export that as it is. But I do have UVs, so let's just play with the UVs. So we said that we're going to set this to 3, the eyes, and this. Okay, we have 3 objects. Let me just have a look at the chat really quickly. Hang on, there's a little bit of a few things. So let me go through it quickly. I should say having used properly. Yep, Vertex Paint. Appreciate your process. No worries, Lexirium. Their EVs need to have to. Oh yeah, so let me just show you that as well. So let's say if you want to work with the UVs, but you have something that doesn't have UVs. If you have subdivision levels like this, right? And it doesn't have to be this one, but let's just use with that. You can just go to the lowest subdivision level and you can click. In fact, you don't have to. You could be here and you can just go to the UV plugin and you can go to the UV master and you can click on work on clone. So work on clone allows you to, it basically creates a new mesh and it goes to the subdivision level number one. And you see it doesn't have subdivision. It's just a simple mesh. And then you can tell the software, or you can tell ZBrush with the UV master, I want to unwrap this. So I'm going to click on unwrap just as it is. That's it. So you can click on morph UV and it's going to give you, it's going to be all right. It's not going to be the best UV, but it works. And that's it. You just now have UVs. You can create the textures and export it. You can control this a little bit more. I'm not going to get into too much. I have a dedicated PDF sort of ebook guide that I created just about the UV master. I think, let me see, Blender UV master ebook. Okay, so if you go to the store, so the Pablanda store or store.pablanda.academy, you can find this, and this is free. You can just download it in here, and it covers everything you need to know about the UV Master. It is done in a older version of ZBrush, but it's still relevant, and the process and the tools in the UV Master, they haven't changed. So you will be able to create UV maps that are pretty decent for texturing very easily. So yeah, have a look at that. I'll send the link in here. Yep, that's it. All right, so that is in terms of creating UV maps. Let's go back to this one. Um, and what is the, okay, let me just check. I'm just checking the chat really quickly. Sorry, Kim, no worries. Cool. What program is this? This is ZBrush. Sorry, well, we're using ZBrush and Marmoset. Yeah, so the rendering is Marmoset. What's the difference between Marmoset and Substance? They could do the same thing nowadays. So Marmoset has introduced like some really cool and effective texturing tools. So you could just do PPR texturing directly in Marmoset, whereas with Painter, but it's primarily a rendering software. Whereas with Painter, it's more a texturing authoring tool, and it does have a nice eye-ray rendering, but it's very limited. You can get really nice stuff from it. So yeah, that's the main difference. You could do both. I personally prefer to keep Marmoset as a rendering tool because that's how basically that's how I learned it and that's how it started. But you can use it for both, really. Cool. Substance primarily. Yeah, cool. Thanks for answering that. Hey Juan, hola, muchas gracias por tu conocimiento. No worries. You want to develop a material with wool and Substance Painter, but you don't know if you can do the hair or the fluff, the texture in Substance. Yeah, you can do all of that in Substance. It's just the real fluffiness of a material that is going to have any type of fiber. It's you probably need to rely on actual fibers to create it, but you can get something really close to wool in Painter. Um, Let me actually plug in here something else. So if you go to the Pablanda Academy, it is closed at the moment. Oh, that also reminds me of something, guys. Sorry, I'm just branching out way too much, but very quickly, Enzo's course, Anatomy for Superheroes, which is 100% in Spanish, but we do have English subtitles. It is closing today for me, but tomorrow in Argentina. It's going to close at midnight Argentina time, so -3 GMT or GMT -3. That's the time zone, and it's absolutely fantastic. Course. This is Enzo. This is going to be your instructor, and he has put together this. He spent almost like 8 months, 9 months, almost like a year, really, developing this. And it is a course dedicated to anatomy, but like exaggerated anatomy for superheroes. And then you will be also you will be able to apply certain things because it comes with this bonus material. So, or bonus, sorry, this module 7, which allows you to cut the model for 3D printing. So he's going to show you his really good and clean, simple way to get things ready for 3D printing. And there is a bonus module as well that talks about Substance Painter. So this is kind of like a quick sort of boss that he does. Send it to Substance Painter and also renders this in Marmoset. So it kind of like covers what I'm showing you a little bit more in depth. But it's a very simple thing. It's a bonus module. Anyway, so the point is that this course is closing for enrollment, and once that's closed, I don't know exactly when we're gonna open it again. I think it depends really on Enzo's availability, because this course also comes with a private community where you're gonna get feedback and you can ask questions. And as part of the as part of a part of this enrollment as well, Enzo is going to do some live sessions for this. You can just play this video and see a little bit more of this course. Anyway, so there was just like a little plug here. I'll drop it in there in case you're interested, because yeah, if you're undecided but you kind of like want to go in, make sure that you do it before the deadline, because once we close, we cannot let anyone else in. So anyway, that's one thing. If you go to courses or explore courses here, you will also see the Substance 3D Painter, which is currently closed. This is my course. We'll probably open it before the end of the year at some point, depending on how we go with time. But I just want to show you for Juan that asked. So the woolly hat of this character, that's done 100% in in Substance. So I do have it here. Let me see. Module 3. Here we go. So this guy, the woolly hat, again, the you could achieve something very close to that woolly feel, but if you want to take it to the next level and make it super realistic, you are going to rely on the actual fibers to show, especially if you want something a bit messy. But yeah, so I wanted to show you that. Alrighty, let's go back to what we started with. Um, why he's using ZBrush render? Because maybe you're asking someone else, but I just answered it. Yeah, I just want to use. I want to show you guys like the option to render in a different software. Really, I don't prefer one over the other. In fact, I use rendering. For me, it's kind of like an agnostic part of the process. I can use any rendering tool. That sounded kind of like I'm showing off, but I don't mind actually using any rendering tool. Is whatever works for what I'm doing. So I can use Marmoset, I can use Maverick, I could use Blender. It doesn't really matter. In this case, just choose Marmoset because I get a lot of questions about that. So I just wanted to show you guys. Alrighty. So please make a stylized texture course. Okay. Just because you're asked very quickly, there is a dedicated module on stylized textures in these Substance Painter. So this is hand painted. This is a stylized texture. And this is a course that we use. It's a project-based course, meaning that I give you all the files, so you just need to concentrate on texturing. And the entire lessons, all the lessons of this module is about techniques and things that I've developed and that I've learned as well that work really well for like stylized texturing. So we do this, it's called the Excalibur project. And we do that, and this is 100% stylized. And I also show you as part of this project the new tools in Painter to do like the stylization filters and all of that good stuff. But yeah, so just keep an eye on that. By the way, if you're interested in this because it's closed right now, you can just click or leave your name and an email here and subscribe, and then you'll get notifications when this course open as well. All right, let's go back to this because Lexirium, will you have a Q&A after the stream? No, like just put questions right into the chat right now. I mean, we are doing a little bit of Q&A. I'm happy to answer those, but I want to actually show you. So let's go to this and export it. So I'm going to go to see plugin. Remember, this is the one that has UVs for all of the meshes. In fact, let me just check. I'm not entirely sure if the teardrops have. Yeah, so we have UVs as well. All right, cool. So again, just a quick recap. We set the subdivision level for all of our meshes. Now we're gonna go to the C plugin palette. We're going to open up the FBX import exporter. That's not the one, sorry. And let's drop it on the left-hand side. And let's clean this up a little bit, sorry. Okay, so we can use the FBX exporter, or we can also use the multi-map exporter. We're gonna come back to this quickly because from here you can also export the mesh. But again, I don't wanna overcomplicate things. Let's just keep it very simple. I'm gonna show you the manual process and then the reason why I kind of like wanted to mention the multi-map exporter. So in the FBX exporter, because I have 3 different subtools, I need to make sure this is set to visible. Because if it is set to selected, which I believe is the default, then it's going to only export the one that I have selected, regardless of which one I choose, right? So let's make sure that this is set to visible, and I'm gonna click on export. And let's go to my folder that I created for live stream, and let's call this one Uakari, um, Uakari monkey. Oh, by the way, another very quick thing. Some of you guys have been like wondering what this is, and some of you, well, in Instagram they say, "Oh, this looks very similar to the macaque, like the Japanese monkeys and all of that." And yeah, it's not like it's a made up creature. I actually use a very cool real creature, which is called the Uakari monkey. See, this Uakari monkey, um, which is real. So we just use that as our base. So you can just go to previous live streams and see that the references that we use. So it is a real thing, or like based on a real creature, which is pretty amazing. But anyway, so that has been exported already. So we exported the FBX. We can now go to Marmoset again. And I'm going to bring in, just drag and drop the FBX again. All right, so we now have the FBX. And because we exported an FBX with multiple objects, we have multiple materials. So we have the material for the eyes, for the head, and for the tear. Let's actually call this one here. Again, a very personal thing. I like to, whatever I'm using materials, I like to just name them like this, kind of like with capital letters. And so we know what we're doing. Skin or head, it doesn't matter. In this case, we only have the head. So if you had maybe legs or exposed chest or something, it's better to just be more specific than skin. But in this case, is fine. This is the setup that we did for the previous one. So we have the nice camera, we have the lighting, everything else is working fine. So I'm gonna start here. Yeah, and so we already have the materials assigned because that's the materials that come with the FBX. However, if you want to create a new material and assign it, you can just click on this icon here. It works the same way. I'll just call this one test to assign. So you can take this and double click it, maybe change the color to, I don't know, blue, and drag and drop it. So that's how it works. You can just drag and drop it, and that's it. But let's go back to the ones we had. So these ones are already assigned. It's just that they come as blank materials. So the first one will be the eyes. So I'm going to take the eyes, double click on it, because these ones are pretty simple. And I'm going to choose from albedo. I'm going to change that to vertex color. So now we have some vertex color, some polypaint going on from the so from the FBX that we exported. Now here is the problem, right? So because we exported this at subdivision level 2, because we are relying purely on the points, right? On the vertex color. Let's switch to this one. You can see. You'll see this fine. Let's hang on. There we go. I just so that you can see it a little bit easier. So we're relying on these points to generate that sharpness of the texture. So if you want to have more texture, you need to import it. But this is when the texture comes in handy. So we don't really need to use, in this case, we don't really need to use vertex color. We can rely on the albedo. So we're going to create the normal maps and the texture map, sorry, and bring it in. So let's do that next. So I'm going to go to ZBrush, and let's do the eyes first. So I'm going to go to the highest subdivision level, and I'm going to do this manually first, and then we'll do the multi-map exporter. So now in the high subdivision level, we have the nice subdivision, right? Because we have a bunch of points, and that's basically the vertex color. So let's go to the tool palette, and we can go to the texture map here. And we don't have any texture map because again, this is just polypaint, but we do have UVs. So we're gonna create a texture map from the polypaint. It's as easy as it sounds. So you click on new from polypaint, and now we have a texture, right? You'll see nothing changes in here because all we've done is we mapped all of these points into our UV map. That's it. Now, the next thing, and this is super important, remember, for those of you who don't know, but it will be like an eye opener moment. But for those of you who know, you know that in ZBrush everything works kind of like flipped in the vertical axis. So if I export this as it is right now, it's not gonna match because it is not flipped. So what I need to do before I export it is I'm gonna click on clone texture. Cloning texture just means that it's gonna take this texture that I have here and it's gonna put it in my texture palette. So it's basically clone it. Let's put it here. So now I have the texture in there, right? I'm using a custom UI, but this is the same. Like you will be able to see everything that I'm using here in the palettes. Um, so yeah, just basically clone that texture. Then I'm gonna select the texture, which is currently selected, and I'm gonna click on Flip V. So this is gonna flip this vertically. So you see it just changes. And now I can go ahead and export that. And I'll send that. I know this sounds like a bit of a tedious process. And I'm gonna call this one Ice Color. But this is the manual way of doing it. So you can adjust the texture. I'm just gonna click OK. So when I export it as it is, that's it. All right. Now the other thing to keep in mind is that the textures that you will create, and even if you click on texture from Polypaint, is gonna be depending on the size of your UV map. So in the UV map section, you can create larger textures. You can say set my UV map to be 4K. So if you hit 4K and click on create from Polypaint, this texture is gonna be 4K. But for the eyes, I usually don't go over 2K. It's not necessary unless you're gonna have like a super close up in 4K resolution or whatever. But yeah, this is now my texture. Great. So now let's go back in here in Marmoset, select the eyes, and I'm going to drag and drop that into the albedo. So now you see, even though this is very low res compared to what we had in Paint in ZBrush, right? Because it's low res, we still have the nice definition of the polypaint. Let's go ahead and tweak the material of the eye so we can just leave it be. So I'm gonna go to the roughness. The roughness controls the sharpness of that reflection. So I'm gonna set this to 0. And now if I rotate the environment, we have that nice reflection all around, right? Super cool stuff. Another thing that I like to do, again, very personal thing, there's other ways of doing it, because remember, we are just using a single mesh. The more realistic effect will be achieved if you have like the two meshes with the lensing and all of that, but just because this works for what I need, I'm just gonna keep it simple. But I wanna do in the transmission, I'm gonna change this to subsurface scattering. So that is gonna give me a little bit of softness. You see, I can exaggerate it as well, maybe not too much. But you see, it's kind of like diffusing the color a little bit, and that creates that sort of milky um, effect. I'm gonna turn off the head so that you don't see that reflection of the head, right? So I can change that subsurface scattering depth, but it's just gonna be tiny. So I'm just gonna add a little bit so that is softer. And also I can change the color of that subsurface scattering. So basically the wavelength of the light that gets scattered through the medium, I'm gonna change that maybe to more of a yellowish tone. That's it. That's how much I will actually tweak the eyes. Now there's another thing that you can take into account. So right now, again, this is pretty, I mean, it's not super low res, but it's a low res mesh. If you want to have like a nicer render, you can just click on this object, especially if you exported something even lower res. And then in the actual object itself, so you see this is my FBX. If I expand it, I have the 3 objects. If you select the eyes, you can go here where it says subdivision, and I click on subdivide once, and it's actually going to subdivide the mesh. So I can do the same thing with this bit. I'll subdivide it, and you see how like the sharpness of these edges is gonna change. See, before, after. And we can increase the subdivision level. Let's bring in the head, and we can do the same thing. So I'm gonna select the head, where you can see some of the polygons there. So we can select that, and we can click on subdivide, and that smooths all of that. Maybe subdivision level 2. So you can do all of these directly from Marmoset. Awesome. All right. Just so that we don't waste too much time, I'm just going to assign to the tier instead of creating a texture. I'm just going to give it a color because I'll be honest, there's not much texture happening in here, and maybe that's too much. I'll select some similar color. All right, and it's also a pretty reflective surface or material, so I'm going to reduce the roughness a bit. Okay, so we have the eyes and the tears sorted. Now we can work on the skin and show you the other bits of the process that I was missing. Is there any questions about this so far, guys? I'll show you the multi-map exporter and do things a little bit fast and more streamlined now. Um, do you have Q&A stream after the stream? Like I said, like Lexirium, we can do one later. It's no problem. Use the name when I played out, not played a few years now. Okay, so Yankovic, you haven't been able to do a decent UV in ZBrush ever. Um, yeah, no worries. Actually, no, I was I was gonna say something, but I cannot share it just yet, just yet. But there's gonna be something cool coming on UVs. Okay. Hey Pablo, I'm working on a 10 again for Warframe, and I get lost making the skin. I work in the spider humanoid, but I find harder to make the details ambiguous and not the literal spider in details. So Saskia, hang on. Yeah, so Saskia, there is a bunch of different ways of doing it. It's more about like choosing what type of materials and the references that you want to create. Again, just it might not be what you need, but it could give you an idea. If you go to the Pablander Academy and go to resources, there's a bunch of you can filter by uh, ZBrush brushes, and there's a bunch of them. The ones with the green, those are like the premium brushes that are like $10 or $15. But there are a few more. If I move here, that you can use for like texturing that sort of thing. So you have bumpy pores. Actually, you can just filter by creature, and then you get some creature brushes that you can use. The ones that I'm going to mention though is a premium pack, but it's a set of brushes to detailing insects. So if you click on that one, this is I think $15, but it is a pack of brushes that I created to essentially detail these type of creatures. So they have like these sort of patterns for the eyes, and all of these ones, by the way, are just quick sketches in ZBrush with polypaint and rendering Marmoset. Most of them, I think. So these are like the patterns and the things that you can achieve with the brushes. Uh, so if you're doing like a spider type of thing creature, maybe this will be helpful. If not, if you want something a bit more custom, the creature brushes are probably better because it gives you a range of more organic things. I don't know. Feel free to explore this. I'll just send you the link. Oh, Saskia, thank you so much. Yeah, so if you have them, then those brushes are probably going to be a good starting point. Alrighty, so because we want to keep the textures and play around with that a little bit, so I'm going to select the head, and I'm going to go to the high subdivision level because that's where I have all my details. If you want to do this manually, but you don't have to because this plugin comes in with ZBrush, the multi-map exporter. But if you want to do it manually, what you need to do is you can go to the normal map in here. Then you play around with the settings, which honestly, the only thing that you really need for this type of organic things is make sure that it's a tangent normal. Otherwise, if you don't turn this on, it's going to create the world space normal. But you want tangent normal, meaning that it's going to look at the normal of each part of or like the surface essentially, and it's going to create the normal map based on that. And the normal map, for those of you who don't know, is essentially how you can extract all of these high detail information from ZBrush for a low res mesh. So just make sure that you have this tangent on. Smooth UV is pretty important as well. The flip green, because again, when you create the normal map, you need to flip the green channel. The flip green channel has to do with a couple of terms that you might have heard before, which are the DirectX or the OpenGL. So this is just ways for the software to interpret a normal map, and it just means that it will read the green channel upside down depending on what you choose. But you can change that in Marmoset as well, so you don't really need to. And the other thing, I'm gonna smooth normals, or I'm gonna let you know that you can smooth normals. This works really well, especially for low resolution meshes. And the adaptive is something that you can try to enable it or not. It is meant to, if you leave it on, it is meant to give you a much more accurate and precise result. It's just gonna take a little bit longer. And honestly, I haven't found that it makes a huge difference. Maybe if you have like a HD geometry and you're gonna have like super sharp 8K maps, it's gonna take longer, but this one is probably something good to enable. But for most normal maps, I would just keep the adaptive off, and that's it. You can just click on create normal map and it will create a normal map. So I'll just show you. Let's go to the lowest subdivision level, sorry, and click on create normal. So ZBrush is going to look at the highest subdivision normal, highest subdivision level, and it's going to create all those normals, all those details. So now we have all the details in a normal map, super clean and nice. We can export that and just get on with it. But I'm going to do it from the multi-map exporter. So from here, I'm going to export the texture. So I'm just going to enable texture from polypaint. So it's going to create that for me again. For the head. Remember, we've only done it for the eyes, so I'm going to do it for the head. So texture from polypaint. We can create an ambient occlusion. It's just going to take a little bit longer, and it's not going to be the best ambient occlusion. So I'm going to give you another technique in just a bit. We can export cavity. Yeah, let's export cavity so we can play around with that. And that's it. We're going to leave everything off. So normal, texture, and cavity. I'm also going to turn off subtools. If you leave subtools on, ZBrush is going to export normal, texture, and cavity in this case for all the visible subtools, which we don't need to. We already assign a color to the eyes and to the teardrops. Well, the tear ducts, we already have a color. So I'm going to turn this off. That's what I'm getting at. So we're only going to concentrate on the head. The other thing is that you can establish what size of map you want. Because this is the head, you can go for 4K, and you'll see there is no button for 8K, but you can take this slider and push it all the way to 8K. So just for the sake of demo and show you how easy and fast it is to export 8K resolution for 3 maps in one go, I'm going to leave it at 8, but probably we don't need it. The border of the map, this is just essentially how, like when the normal maps or the texture maps are going to have a space all around it. So this determines the thickness of that border. So I'm not going to touch anything like that. I'm going to leave the flip vertical enabled so that when it exports all of these textures, I don't have to do the manual process that I showed you before to go to clone and flip here and export. It's going to do it automatically. Then I'm going to click on export options, and here's where you can fine tune the normal, texture, polypaint, all of that stuff. So let's go to the normal first, and you see I have the same settings as I have in here. So tangent, smooth UVs, and smooth normals. I'm going to leave the adaptive off. Now, this subdivision level is actually pretty important because you need to set the subdivision level that you have when you exported the mesh. And if you remember, we exported this mesh at, well, I cannot remember now. Maybe you do. You guys know. I think it's 3, a subdivision level 3. Let me double check that. Yeah, I think it's level 3. Okay, so that way is going to match exactly. So basically what you need to do is create all of these maps based on subdivision level 3. Sorry, not all the maps, just the normal map. So I'm going to set this to 3. So ZBrush is going to know now that we're going to create all of those details, but ultimately those details are going to match the subdivision level 3 that we exported. If you exported at subdivision level 1 because you want a low-res mesh, just make sure that this is set to 1 and so on and so forth. That's it. If you export at the highest subdivision level, you don't really need to export normal maps. So you can ignore that bit. Okay, so the next bit will be, that's it for the normal map. So I'm just going to leave it as it is. The cavity map, I'm just going to leave it as it is. It's not going to be as usable, currently, but yeah, we just leave it as it is. And the texture from polypaint, there is no real settings that you can do here because there's nothing that you can change. You just need to convert the polypaint to texture. So let's go ahead and with with all these things as they are, Oh, by the way, you can also save this preset if this is something that you're gonna do constantly, multiple times for all your characters. You can save this as a preset, and then you don't have to change any of this. I want to click on Create All Maps, and I'm gonna get a pop-up, which you cannot see it because I put it on a different screen, but it's essentially the this. Hang on, sorry. Anyway, so it's this thing. So you just choose how you want to name them. I want to call this Uakari textures. And it's currently doing the normal map, and it's going to export all of this in just a bit. So it's done the color, and this is going to be the cavity. That's it. 44 seconds to export 4K maps, 4K maps. And look at the sharpness of this normal map. Beautiful. This is exactly what we want. Okay, sweet. This is the cavity. We can make it a bit more useful, but it's fine. And this is the texture. Great. So we now have the 3 texture maps. Now, the other thing that I was going to show you is the ambient occlusion. If you use this ambient occlusion, is the same thing as going to the masking properties here and clicking on this mask by ambient occlusion. If you click on this one, it's going to create the ambient occlusion. However, this is not as powerful as the ambient occlusion from the ambient occlusion plugin. So what I prefer to do is I want to make sure that this, I don't mess with the polypaint, so I'm just going to clone this quickly. So this is an extra step. You don't have to do this, but I think it's important to know that the option is in there. So this is just a clone of what I had. This is the one that has UVs. I'm just going to fill it with a white color. So fill object. I'm also going to turn off texture. Hang on. Why is this giving me that? There we go. All right. So fill it with white color. Then I'm going to go to the ambient occlusion plugin, and I'm going to click compute. So this ambient occlusion is going to be ray traced ambient occlusion. So it's going to be a lot more realistic than the one that you get from the multi-map exporter. And the cool thing about this ambient occlusion plugin is that it's just a mask. So it's going to calculate the ambient occlusion, and it's going to create a mask for that. So it's masking based on the ambient occlusion. There we go. So now we have a nice ambient occlusion. So all I need to do is I'm going to click once on the, holding control and click once on the canvas to invert the ambient occlusion. And then I'm going to select a black color and fill object and then clear. So now we basically have a polypaint with a nice ambient occlusion, a black and white ambient occlusion, or sorry, a black and white polypaint, which is the ambient occlusion. So now you guessed it, is just going to be a matter of exporting the normal map. So I'm going to create a polypaint based on the ambient occlusion. I'm going to clone the texture. This is more of the manual process, but you could do it also from the multi-map. Let's flip that and let's export that. And let's move that out of the way. Let's click on, let's see if I can find it again. Okay, so I'm gonna call this AO. Click OK. All right. So that's why this is polypaint. That's why I clone the character, because otherwise I'll just remove the polypaint, the work that we did. Cool. So a lot of process there, but I wanted to cover different avenues that you guys have to export things. But now we have, look, we have ambient occlusion, we have the cavity, which I'll show you why I exported the cavity in a second. We have the color, and we have the normal map. All right. Now in Marmoset, we are going to plug those things. So I'm going to double click on the skin material. And the first one I'd like to plug in is the normal map, so I can see the actual details. So I'm going to drag and drop the normal into the surface that you see is set to normal. So that's what I need. And this is what the green channel thingy that I mentioned. I mean, this one is working, but I'm going to show you maybe here. So in Marmoset, you can actually flip the vertical Y, which is the vertical green channel. So if I do this, and if you've got this before, you go like, oh, I have all these details, but they look weird. Like, I'm not sure. and you think, oh, maybe it's the lighting or something, but it's nothing to do with the lighting. It's just how the software interprets the green channel, which is the light coming from the top, to create the effect of the normals. So I'm gonna just leave that as it is, and you see it's just a nice set of normals. Right? So we now have all the details. Now, you might be wondering as well how I achieved those additional bumpiness and details in here in the render. That is because I not only use the normal that I exported from ZBrush, which gives me all the details that we sculpted directly in there, but I use the detail normal. And that's just allowing you to create a separate normal map that you can apply and create a bunch of details. So I'll show you the one that I used, and I'll show you also how to create one. So this image right here. So it is a very simple generic pattern that tiles in all directions. And when you drag and drop this into your render, you can apply all of these as a secondary set of details. So I'm going to show you what this does first, and then hopefully if we have time, I'll show you how to create one, because it's really simple, but it's outside of the process. So instead of just using normals, and let's also get closer so you can see the effect. So instead of using just normals, I'm going to click on this dropdown and change this to detail normals. So nothing changes, but the only thing that changes is that we now have this additional information. So I'm going to drag and drop this thing right here, this map, drag and drop it in there. And in fact, I'm going to turn off the custom normal map just so that you can see more of this. So this is what this normal map is doing. It's just creating this sort of like pattern, but we can tile it. So I'm going to push this tile quite a bit. That's how you can achieve those additional details. And then you can blend them, of course, but yeah, I'm gonna do that. All right. Now, it has a weight map, meaning that you can, with a black and white image, control exactly where those maps or those details are placed. So just for fun, I'm gonna take this, the ambient occlusion, and I'm gonna drop it in here. So you see, anything in that image that is white or fully white is going to have those details. Anything that is black or towards the darker grays is not going to have it. So anything around the eyes, because that's where the ambient occlusion is. Let's move the lighting around. You see there is less of this. So you can just change that weight. In my case, I think I'm fine with this. I think that works well. But then you can also combine it with the other one. So, or the one that we exported from ZBrush. I'm going to click on that. And now we have a nice combination of the details from ZBrush and the ones that we created from this details normal. So that's just a really nice, simple, neat trick to create the details. Now, the next thing before I bring in the rest of the maps is to deal with the subsurface scattering. I personally prefer to deal with the subsurface scattering or the translucency of the material before I bring any color so that I can see things a bit clearer. So I'm going to go down to the transmission and I'm going to click on volumetric scattering. So you can use subsurface scattering, but volumetric scattering is a bit more accurate for this because it's going to actually look at the volume of your character. And whenever there is a thin area like the ears, you see it's a bit more reddish. That's it. It's a very simple thing to do, and look at that. It just creates this really nice transmission of color. And you can change this, but you can push it a bit more. Let's set it to 1.5. All right, but you see it gets where it should be, where the subsurface scattering should be more prominent is wherever there is more cartilage. I can never pronounce that word, cartilage. Basically, the ear, right? Or what most sharks are made of. And then the nose as well. This area right here, the nostrils will be pretty thin, and usually the eyelids as well. So yeah, that's what I prefer to do first. Cool. All right, so we now have the subsurface scattering working. We have the details. So the only thing that we have left, and I'm actually going to collapse this so that we know exactly which ones we need to control. So we have the metalness, the roughness, and the color. So let's go with the color. Again, the color, we have the polypaint as a texture. Drop it in there. And that's starting to look a lot nicer. Great. And we have all the details and everything. It's just that because I have the ray tracing, sort of like takes a while to render. If you look at the bottom right, this is kind of like my bar of, let's say, rendering. So when I move, I need to just let it wait for a little bit and just let it rest up, and that's it. So this is great. And I could just leave it like this, but we have the option to control the roughness. So not everywhere is going to have the same level of shininess, if you will, for this character. And that also brings in more realism, so that it's not everywhere the same. So if you think about a humanoid character, the areas around the eyelids, maybe around the cheeks, the nose, they will be a little bit more greasy because of the the fat underneath the dermis, and pimples and things like that. Or maybe if you scratch your forehead quite a bit, you put like the greasy fingers in there as well. So anyway, the point is that wherever there's more grease, there will be a bit more shininess to it, and then the roughness will be like this, but not everywhere. So we can do a couple of things. I'm going to bring in Photoshop. This is kind of like the old school way of doing it. You can use what's the name? You can use Substance Painter, which, by the way, I have it open. Maybe that's why I'm a little bit slow on some things, because I just wanted to show you something. This is branching out again, but very quickly. So this is Substance 3D Painter, right? And I have pretty much the same thing that I had in ZBrush. It's just that I created a new layer, a new painting layer, and I assign the color in here, the normal, sorry, the color from ZBrush. And you can do the same thing with the normal map. In fact, let me just do something quickly to show you, just so that you know as well how to do it in Painter. And I'm just going to remove this so you don't have any normals. Okay, so you could just do this. You can go to layers, create a new fill layer, and enable color and normal. And then you can just drag and drop your color into the color, and then your normal into the normal. And that's it. And then you can play with the roughness directly from Painter. That's what I'm gonna do in Photoshop. But that's it. That's how you bring this into Painter. All right, so I'm gonna close that now. And so it should be a little bit faster. And let's go back to Photoshop. And in here, what I'll do is I'm gonna show you the way that I used to do it back in the day. And when I mean back in the day, I mean that I used to box model characters in a application called Wings 3D, which it's actually, I'm gonna show you this because it's pretty funny. Um, Maybe I should do like a tutorial on this and kind of like show you these bits. So this is a free application, and when I was studying animation, this was kind of like the one of the standards to create box modeling. So anyway, this is how I used to just create the variation of the normal maps and all of that. So it's called Wings 3D if you want to play around with it. So I'm gonna bring in the color. I'm also gonna bring in the normal map. And the cool thing about the normal map is that it might look like it's a colored map. So if you look at it, it's like, yeah, it's a blue map that has some bits and pieces of color. But in reality, this map, this normal map, is not a color map, or it's not color information. It's actually black and white maps that have been, or not compressed, but split into the channels. So if you go to the channels of this, you have the red channel, which is ultimately the light coming from the left to right. So you see maybe in these wrinkles here. So the light is coming from the right, so it's hitting, let's say, this wrinkle here, and then it's giving a bit of shadow on this side. So imagine pointing a torch from the right hand side to the left. That's the red channel. The green channel is from the top, so you see the highlight at the top and the shadow at the bottom. And then you have the blue one, which is almost like an ambient occlusion type of thing, because it's shining a torch directly from the camera, or like from the front, from the depth, really. So that's really what the normal map is. It's just a combination of three different channels with three different directions, and that's how you can create the effect or the illusion of the light reacting to it, because you have the information in all axes mapped into one channel. That's how clever the normal maps are. Um, Anyway, you can just use something like the blue map, or you can actually take these, but I'm going to use the blue channel. Control A, C, and D. So just select everything, copy it, and then go here and just paste it. And I'm going to also bring in some levels. Sorry, the other way around. Some levels just to contrast this a bit so you can see it. Usually you want something a bit subtle. But yeah, you now have this. All right, so I'm going to bring in all the channels first. Maybe we can play around with yeah, all the channels, just so that you can see more of it. So I'm gonna make this black and white as well. All right. And then let's also bring in the cavity. This is the reason why I exported the cavity and also the ambient occlusion. Oh, the ambient occlusion is tiny. That's all right. We don't really need the ambient occlusion, to be honest. So I'm just gonna ignore that. I forgot to update the UV map when I exported the ambient occlusion. All right, so here's the trick. You can take the color and duplicate it. Let's make it a black and white image by holding Control Shift and U. So it's just a black and white image. And this alone already is going to provide the software that you're using to render a good variation in roughness. It's just not going to be as accurate or as intense. So let's just save this as a, I want to save it as, and let's save it as a Photoshop file. And let's save it as, hang on, my mouse is losing battery now. So I'm gonna save it as roughness. So this is just a PSD file. Okay, so I'm saving that, and I'm gonna go back into Marmoset, and I'm gonna take the PSD file and I'm gonna drop it directly here. So this is one of the great things about Marmoset. You can drop the PSD file, and you see how it just changes the roughness. So not everywhere is the same. So this is already working. Now, the cool thing about this, before we tweak it any further, is that I can go ahead and create a levels, and I can contrast this. So this will be the cheapest and easiest way to vary the roughness. I'm going to save this file with all these effects over the same file. So that. And then Marmoset, because again, it's just referencing the same file, is going to update automatically. So pay attention to the difference that is going to make between the area around, like I said, the orbit of the eyes and around it. See, so now around here, you have a lot more reflection or roughness than, let's say, around here. So this is kind of like what I'm looking for, but I'm gonna do it a bit better than this. So this is just to show you, or basically to show, yeah, so that you understand the difference between the values. So whatever there is black color is gonna be more reflective in Marmoset, and whatever it is white color is gonna be less reflective. But in all honesty, you want to maintain kind of like a much more uniform, especially for skin, a much more uniform sort of grayscale, so there is not that much contrast. I just wanted to show you roughly what this does. So let's just reset this. Okay. Okay, before I show you this, because we are coming up to an end, so I'm just gonna check the chat. If you have questions, guys, feel free to put them in the chat now. Sorry, Saskia is asking about the course, about 3D Painter course. It's likely to be open again towards the end of December, but I have to check because that's my course as well as the extra mile. So I need to prioritize some of the students in the extra mile because I'm planning to potentially, if I have time, open the extra mile at the end of the year. It is really my hope so that I can, help people sort of start with a strong foot next year. So if I open the extra mile, I might open the substance painting course as well. So we'll just see, depending on my time. Just as long as you have your email in the academy, you will be notified as well. Okay, sorry, I'm just missing a lot of. I think some of you guys. Thanks for helping with the answer of some things. Awesome. All right, so the head is on a separate texture set, just like Pablo's. Yep, cool. Okay. So I don't know why, but my normal maps I export from ZBrush look wrong in Unreal Engine 3D. Less details. I see your model only has 4 million polygons, but your normal looks crisp. The normal map that you get from ZBrush is it's brilliant. It's one of the best ways of creating normals because in ZBrush you're not baking anything. Like you don't have like a low res mesh and a high res mesh and trying to project details and bake them into the low res mesh. In ZBrush, you literally have subdivision levels, so there is no mismatch between a high and low res mesh. You're literally just bringing the high res details into the low res mesh. Let's say in a map. So ZBrush is one of the most accurate ways of creating normal maps. In fact, that's one of the reasons why it became such a industry standard back in the day. And I remember when I first started using ZBrush, the only reason I used ZBrush was to export and create normal maps. But it was just at the time that normal maps was just recently introduced, so it was like a big thing. Before normal maps, we used to just play with bump, and it was just not as good. Anyway, um, details only. Yeah. So sorry about your question. If you can export it from ZBrush, I can guarantee you, like if you follow what I did today, you're gonna get a really nice crispy normal map, crispy normal map from ZBrush. But it's more about how you plug it in Unreal. So you might have to look up some tutorials, some people that know how to do it. I could recommend a a channel that is awesome for that. Jay Hill, so he does a lot of stuff in Unreal, and his work is pristine. So have a look at that, and he might cover that, or you can just ask him. He's super nice dude, so you can ask him a question as well on how to plug a normal app into Unreal. I haven't played with Unreal as much. I usually just my work with Unreal ends where I export things for Unreal, but someone else plugs things for me. So I'm not the best person to ask for that. Do I have a personal mentorship? I do. I'm currently doing some mentorship, but I haven't publicly share that because again, it's very time limited for me for what I have. But the closest best thing to a mentorship or like a personal mentorship is the Extra Mile, because I'm super involved with that, and we have a private community, and essentially that private community is kind of like a mentorship in a way. You put your work, and it's not just me giving feedback; it's like the whole community, and we have amazing artists. So it's I think is the next best thing. um, but and that's another reason why it's a course that part of that course is pre-recorded. The other part is live sessions, but it's not always open, and that's the reason why, because it has that sort of like live component. And if I don't have time because I have other projects, I won't be able to put as much effort and dedication to giving feedback and all of that. So that's the reason why the course is not permanently open, but it will be. So make sure that you drop your email and you'll get it. Do you guys so do your course guide you through the full process from learning the tools, actually applying them in a real production workflow? Yeah, absolutely. It's just about how you define real production workflow. So the course, if you're referring to the extra mile, that's the most complete packet that I have, the most complete learning experience, because it's from zero, like design principles. I just do the concepts of design all the way to producing a final render. But the aim of the course is not to produce a rigged character for animation or cinematics. Is to produce a high quality portfolio render or concept art, but doing it through all the 3D tools. So eventually, if you want to, you can take your final character, the concept that you created, and push it into production. That's you know the best thing. Jay Hill, yeah, Jay Hill. You just type Jay Hill in YouTube and you get it. So he does a lot of Unreal stuff, and it's amazing. Do you like Blender Marmoset better for your character renders? Like I said, it's just whatever works. I can achieve very similar results in Blender as well as Marmoset. Or if I have to pick one, and for whatever reason, and I could not have access to anything else, I will choose Maverick because it's just more realistic. Okay, so let's go back in here and we'll just do a final, because we're just running out of time now. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna duplicate it. So it is exactly the same, but here's a really cool trick. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna go to filter. I'm gonna go to other, and I'm gonna click on high pass. So high pass is just going to look at the values, and it's just gonna try to contrast them. This is a bit too much. So you can use this to sharpen your textures. This is this is one of the methods that we used to do back in the day. So I'm gonna use something like this. and you'll see what it does is kind of like create this set of like I think it's better uh, cavity map. We do have this cavity map, but you see there's a lot of contrast and it's not as clean. So that's why I wanted to show you the export of the cavity map, but this method is a bit better and it's just creating a high pass. Now you can take this, I'm going to duplicate it so that you can see, and we can contrast this a bit more, like so. And then we can play around. I'm going to show you two things. So the first one is with the just the high pass. We can set this to hard light, and that should actually crisp up the details before or below it. So it's just going to add contrast. Then this one we can bring it on top, and we can play with. We can set it to screen maybe, or lighten. Maybe lighten is better. So just lighten up everything, and I'm going to reduce the opacity. So I'm just trying to create a black and white, more neutral version of the map than the saturation that I have. Okay. Now the next thing is obviously you have this awful sort of rim or edge. Um, I will just say duplicate the one at the bottom, create a black mask or a white mask, and then just paint out the rest. So kind of like reveal what you want to have that contrast. I want to use a soft brush, and I'm going to also use symmetry since we have symmetry in this normal map. All right, let's choose something very soft. Like I said, all of this is probably a bit easier to do it in Painter. It's just that I want to show you like alternatives, and I don't know. This is kind of like a fun thing that I used to do. So it's a bit of a nostalgia. It wasn't fun, to be honest. It was just it was a bit tedious. So there's a much better tools right now, but it's kind of like it reminds me of the things that I used to do before. Okay, let's turn the symmetry off. So now we have this, which works a little bit better. So let's go ahead and save this map again and see what the difference is in Marmoset. Still saving. There we go. All right, so you see it's a better, nicely distributed map everywhere. You have like the nice reflection here. I think the nose is working a little bit better, but I want to add a bit more contrast. So all I'm going to do is bring in, I'm going to darken it up. So remember what I said, like the dark values is going to make it more reflective. Lighter values is going to make it more opaque or matte. So I'm going to make things darker in general first. So this is kind of like establishing this is my reflection value or shine roughness value. Sorry, not the non-roughness value. And then I'm going to make it rougher as well. So I'm just adding a bit of contrast. Save. Let's wait until updates. I think it's still saving. Oh yeah, because it's an 8K map, so it's pretty large. All right, perfect. That's it. I think I'm happy with this roughness. It just gives me a good value, and of course we can play with the lighting, but that's probably for a different stream. So one more thing before I let you guys go, you can also play with the normal with the metalness, and this is what I mentioned before, that if you have maps, you can tell this over exactly where you want it. So you can paint them in here, or you can have more control if you go to ZBrush. Let's use this thing here. I want to fill it with a white color. Come on. This is the texture. There we go. All right, so we have this white polypaint. I'm just gonna use a black color now, and let's do some interesting. I'm actually gonna use a custom mask just because it's a little bit sharper. And this could be some kind of like tribal pattern or something. I mean, It could be whatever. It doesn't matter. So I'm just gonna take these now, and I'll do the same thing that I did with the ambient occlusion. We can create a polypaint. Oh, sorry, texture from polypaint. Clone the texture. Go to the texture palette. Flip the white channel and export it. And we can save that in the same place. So I'm gonna call this one metal. So it's kind of like the manual way of doing it. And now I'm going to drop that black and white image here in the metallic surface. And you see everything is metallic but those lines. So I'm gonna invert that metalness. And there we go. We now have some metallic surfaces in here. You can do a few more things. So let's say you wanna also give it a color, for example. Since you have that black and white image, all you have to do, you can create another, let's say, another texture like this. So I'm gonna drag and drop this in there. All right, I'm just gonna do this very quickly. So this is the metal map. So I'm gonna select everything, and I'm going to duplicate the color, and I'm gonna create a mask, and I'm gonna put that in there, and I'm gonna also invert it so that basically whatever there is white color, this is gonna change. So I'm gonna use the hue just to do something like gold, maybe something similar. And just double check that I have enough contrast here in this mask. All right, so I could just go ahead and save this as a color 2. And then I can go into Marmoset and in the color and just need to replace that. So it's going to match exactly where those lines are in gold. And of course, they will be, this probably looks better if you can do some, height definition. In fact, you could just go to ZBrush, utilize this map that you created, and then you can click on Mask by Polypaint. So you go to Masking in the masking palette. This is the last thing I want to show you because I've been just giving you a bunch of different tips all around. So I'm not sure if there's like a cohesive workflow apart from the basics. But you can go mask by color here, and in the mask by color you can click mask by polypaint. Okay, I want to turn off this now. So now we have a mask. In fact, let me actually do something. I think we have the map. No, let me just do it again. I made a mistake here. So mask by polypaint. Click OK. It's because I have the texture. Hang on. All right, so this is the polypaint. Now let's try it again. Mask by polypaint. Oh, so I made a mistake. So mask by polypaint, it allows you to choose the color. I didn't choose the color. There's an easier way to do it. So you can just click and drag, let's say, a white color, and it will mask out, you see, or just the color or the black color. So you can do that, or you can actually mask by intensity. That's probably better. So now it's masking out this, I think. So mask by intensity is probably best. Let's do that. And then I'm gonna turn off the polypaint so you don't see that. All right, so you see this is just the mask that we extracted from the polypaint. And what I'll do is I'm going to click the mask once, holding Control and click, just to blur it a little bit, and then invert that. And then I'm gonna go to the formation palette and create an inflate effect. So I'm gonna push that. Oh, ZBrush crashed. Anyway, that's part of the process. But you can just, hopefully you can see what I was gonna do. I was gonna inflate those lines, and you can export that as normal, and then this will be a little bit more realistic, a bit more interesting. Anyway, I'm kind of like happy with what I had before, so I'm just gonna go back and remove the metalness. We don't need any metallic values. And then just to wrap it up, I'm gonna choose a different environment, something a bit more interesting that creates a bit of a shadow here on the eyes. Probably this, or this is the cool thing about Marmoset as well. Like it has a bunch of lighting scenarios that are pretty cool. Maybe I'm gonna use something like this, like pretty diffuse lighting, but then we can create one light. So to do that, and this is just to wrap it up, I'm going to click on this icon to split horizontal, split vertical. I'm gonna choose the main camera here, and I'm gonna set this to draft or gray, doesn't really matter. And the one here, I'm just going to set this camera to the render. So this is gonna be my render so that I know exactly what are the things that I'm gonna export or how it's going to be rendered. And in here, I'm gonna go to, you can see, let me see, because my camera is hiding a few things. So in here, I'm gonna click on this icon to create a light, and I'm gonna click on spot. So that creates a light. You'll see the effect straight away. But the cool thing about Marmoset, and also if you press Control U, you will be able to visualize the UI. Control U as in U for UI. uh, we can go ahead and, this is the light that it creates. So you can take that and then you can press W, E, or R to rotate and scale it. So you can move it around. But the best way of placing a light in Marmoset for me is to go to this dropdown, and instead of choosing a camera, you can choose the new light. So you click on light, and now you're kind of like looking through that light, and then you can just move it around like so. And then kind of like I'm going to try to find a kind of like a Rembrandt pattern, and I'm going to increase the brightness here. You can see those, and you see it's very, very sharp. So all you need to do is go to the shape and increase the diameter. So that is essentially changing the light source. So the difference between a large panel of light or a light box and a torch that is very, very narrow. So you can just do that, and you can also tint the color with maybe slightly blue or like maybe a warm tone, like so. And we can do another one. So just very simple stuff. Click on a new light spot. Let's switch from light one to light two, the new one. This one, you can make it a bit brighter just so that you can see what we're going to do. And then we're going to add it a kind of like a cold complementary color. And this one might be better to put it at the back. And if you want something very sharp, you can change the spot angle. So you see how it reduces the, the the area that the light is being focused on. You can increase the diameter. And once you establish where the light direction is, if you like it, then you can play around with the diameter a little bit. And then obviously the brightness. Just it's kind of like a rim light, hair light. I think we need to increase that a bit more. That's it. So now we can just click on this icon to kind of like tear this panel off. And if you want to see exactly the kind of like the frame of the camera, you can click on the camera and click on save frame, and you know exactly what you are going to render. And the other cool thing I like to do, and it's a very simple thing, is let's say if we get really close in here, anything that is kind of like a macro close up will have a nice diffuse or blurred effect in the background, or it's called bokeh effect. You can achieve that by changing the focus. So if you click on the focus here, I want to make sure that you can see my camera. Sorry, that you can see what I'm showing you. So yeah, all of this section here. So I'm going to switch between off to ray trace. I'm going to click on sticky focus so that when I move the camera, the focal point, wherever it's going to be sharp, it's going to stick to the point that I choose. With middle mouse button, I can click on the eyes. Usually when you do a character, that's what you want. And then you want to click and drag to adjust how much of that depth. So just a tiny bit. This is one of the effects that you can easily overdo it. And then holding the shift and right click to rotate the environment around just to find a better position for the light, like so. And we can also go back to our sky here. Just want to make sure you can see it. And I'm going to change the color back to, let's say, the blurred sky, or just the sky, to be honest. Because if we have that blurriness from the camera, it's also going to blur the sky. So you see, if I get closer, the sky gets blurred. Right? So it's more realistic in that sense. But if you want something that is, you want to exaggerate it, you can change to blur sky, and then you can control how much blurriness you have. So yeah, you can just move things around. If maybe this guy should be in a much more like a jungle setting or a park setting, maybe this bamboo grove. There we go. So that's a bit more interesting. Also, if you personally, I am bothered by the fading of the camera frame. So you can just go to save frame here and change the opacity to 1, so you can really see this very nice and cinematic In fact, you can change the frame from the render if you want to go for like that sort of like new Instagram post type of thing. Like it's something like this. So we could do something like that. You know what? I'm gonna do a render like this and just put it in Instagram, see what happens. But you can change it. You can change it to anything you want. But yeah, so that's it, guys. I'm gonna leave it here because I gotta go. But hopefully this has been of help. This is the idea with these live streams, right? So if you're new to the things that we're doing in the live stream, make sure that you tune in. I usually share the like when we're gonna start the live stream like the day before, and we usually do it on a Wednesday. So check the calendar in the Pablander Academy. I'll show you where that is so that you can keep up with the next one. So if you go to the Pablander Academy, go to events, and this is the one that we are doing right now. You can actually click on it and watch it directly from the website. But yeah, so these are the previous ones. So the first one is where we actually sculpted the character. This is the one that we did all the details. This is the one that we did the texturing. So this today kind of like wraps up this project with a nice render that we can do. And yeah, so keep an eye on this. You can search for past events. Like I said, some of you guys ask for specific things. So um, you can check, I don't know, I'm going to do hard surface. So you can type hard surface, or you can type, what's the name? PBR. Not PBR. What am I thinking? Comic. So anything to do with comic might be in here. So you can search through it, or you can just go through all of these ones. So these are things that we did in the past. This one was a really, really nice one for those of you interested in 3D printing. This is from Enzo, who's basically the teacher for the academy for the anatomy for superheroes. So he did this live stream. You can watch it now if you want on trimming and doing things for printing. So it is very similar to what he does in the course, but he does it obviously a lot more structure and gives you all the tips and tricks as well. So just to wrap it up, want to remind you guys, because I usually get, sometimes, not every time, but sometimes I get people that missed it, or it's like, oh, I thought it was gonna be like, midnight my time, or I just missed it by like 1 hour. Can you open it? And unfortunately, because the way that we set things up, like in the back end, once the deadline is finished, it's really hard to open it without doing a whole bunch of things. So if you want to join, make sure that you do it before the deadline, because it's going to be really, really cool. And there's a community, like a private community. There is a bunch of things. And if you have questions, feel free to message me directly, or you can reach out to Enzo. You can click on Enzo's profile here, and then you can go to his Instagram, just so you can see like the level of what you're dealing with. So this is Enzo. He's featuring like the beta images of ZBrush as well. These are the type of creatures, and not creatures, sorry, superheroes and stylized and really cool anatomy that he does. So he's an amazing artist, and so we're very lucky to have him as part of the academy officially. So I strongly recommend this. Now I know that for some of you, you will say, "Well, I don't speak Spanish." Fair enough, but in the course we have subtitles in English, and honestly, the way that he speaks things and the pace at which he does, it's really easy to understand. Almost if you don't have any audio at all and you just look what he's doing, you can like zone out, because the way that he does it is it just works. So it is 100% in Spanish, but we have subtitles in English, and it's very easy to follow along. So I would strongly recommend, if you don't want to join for whatever reason, still go and check out Enzo's page and give it a follow, because his work is amazing. I'll drop it in there, and also I'll share the link here. Remember, guys, we are close to close. It closes for me will be tomorrow, but sorry, for me will be, I think, today. Oh man, no, I made a. Let me just double check. But it's Argentina time. There is actually sorry, there is actually a reel. So this is Enzo, but in here he will say exactly what time it closes. So he will say that is GMT. So it closes tomorrow at midnight for Argentina. So I think right now in Argentina is around uh, 8 o'clock. I don't know if there's anyone from Argentina at PM. So it will be tomorrow for you. So the enrollment closes for you tomorrow. Anyway, guys, I think that has been it for today. Hopefully, you found this useful. And if you have questions, feel free to drop them, in the comments of the video or later on. I usually just collect a few things, and uh, I will we will start something new next live stream. But I usually use your questions and the things that you're interested, so that we can guide the content of these live streams. Yep, that's it for me today, and yeah, have a good one. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you probably next week. Just keep an eye on